Every single day, millions of people pour one of these two oils into their pan without ever asking what it is actually doing inside their body. But when researchers began looking at what happens to these oils after you consume them, what they found was not what anyone expected. Today we are breaking down olive oil versus sunflower oil, the science, the facts, and what the data is really telling us. If you want to know the truth about what goes on your plate, hit subscribe, because this is just the beginning. Two bottles sit on the kitchen counter. One has been there for thousands of years. The other is barely a century old. Both are poured into pans every single morning across millions of households in the United States of America and beyond. But behind those two ordinary bottles is a story that most people have never been told. A story about how these oils are made, what they are made of, and what they quietly do to the human body long after the meal is over. For most of recorded human history, cooking oil was simple. You pressed something, olives, seeds, nuts, and you got oil. No chemistry, no factory, just pressure and time. That is exactly how olive oil has been made for more than 6,000 years. Ancient civilizations across the Mediterranean used it for cooking, medicine, rituals, and lighting their lamps. Olive oil was not just an ingredient, it was a foundation of life. And yet, in the 20th century, something changed. A new oil arrived, cheaper, more abundant, easier to produce at scale, and it slowly began replacing olive oil on kitchen shelves around the world. That oil was sunflower oil. Sunflower oil did not emerge from ancient tradition. It came from an industrial process developed in the early 20th century that allowed manufacturers to extract oil from sunflower seeds faster than ever before. Suddenly, a bottle of cooking oil cost a fraction of what olive oil cost. Governments recommended it. Food companies built entire product lines around it. And consumers, trusting the institutions around them, made the switch. But here is the question almost nobody stopped to ask. What exactly are we getting when we choose one over the other? Every cooking oil is made up of fats, but not all fats are the same. The scientific community broadly categorizes dietary fats into three groups: saturated fats, monounsaturated fats, and polyunsaturated fats. Olive oil is composed primarily of monounsaturated fat, specifically a compound called oleic acid, which typically makes up 60 to 80% of its total fat content. Sunflower oil, by contrast, is dominated by polyunsaturated fat, specifically linoleic acid, which belongs to the omega-6 family, accounting for 65 to 70% of its content. Why does that distinction matter? Monounsaturated fats have one double bond in their chemical structure. That single bond makes the fat relatively stable, resistant to oxidation and heat-induced breakdown. Polyunsaturated fats have multiple double bonds. Every additional double bond is a point of vulnerability where the fat molecule can react with oxygen and begin to break down. And this is where the temperature question becomes absolutely critical. When you heat an oil, you are not just warming it, you are introducing energy into a chemical system. For stable oils, the molecules hold together and the oil behaves predictably. But for oils high in polyunsaturated fat, heat is a destabilizing force. As sunflower oil approaches and exceeds its smoke point, it does not just smoke. It undergoes a chemical transformation. The polyunsaturated fat molecules begin to oxidize and recombine into new compounds, some of which researchers have flagged as potentially problematic. One class of compounds receiving significant research attention is aldehydes. Studies have found that vegetable oils high in polyunsaturated fats, when heated to typical cooking temperatures, can generate aldehyde concentrations far above what regulatory bodies consider safe for chronic exposure. Olive oil, with its high monounsaturated fat content, appears to generate significantly fewer of these compounds under the same conditions. But the story does not end at the stove. What happens inside the body after the oil is consumed is equally important. When olive oil reaches the digestive system, the oleic acid it contains is absorbed in ways that have been associated with a range of physiological effects. research from Mediterranean population studies, some of the longest-running nutritional studies ever conducted, has consistently shown associations between high olive oil consumption and various markers of cardiovascular health. Researchers are careful to note they are observing associations, not proving direct causation. But the consistency across decades of research has made olive oil one of the most studied dietary fats in history. One of the most discussed components of extra virgin olive oil is not actually a fat. It is a group of compounds called polyphenols. These naturally occurring antioxidants are retained in the oil when it is cold, pressed without heat or chemicals. Polyphenols are being studied for their potential role in reducing oxidative stress, a process in which unstable molecules called free radicals damage cells over time. The research is ongoing, and scientists are careful not to overstate conclusions. But their near total absence in refined sunflower oil is a meaningful distinction that does not appear on any nutrition label. Sunflower oil contains very little in the way of polyphenols. What it does contain in notable quantities is vitamin E, specifically a form called alpha-tocopherol. Vitamin E is a fat, soluble antioxidant that plays important roles in immune function and cellular protection. This is a genuine nutritional strength of sunflower oil. However, researchers have raised questions about what happens to this vitamin E when the oil is exposed to high heat, and evidence suggests a significant portion is degraded during cooking. There is another dimension to this comparison that rarely surfaces in mainstream discussions: the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid. The human body requires both, but in a specific balance. Researchers estimate that for most of human evolutionary history, the dietary ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 was somewhere between 1 to 1 and 4 to 1. In the modern American diet, that ratio has shifted to somewhere between 15 to 1 and 25 to 1. Sunflower oil is predominantly omega-6. Olive oil, dominated by monounsaturated oleic acid, does not significantly push that ratio in either direction. For anyone already consuming a diet high in processed foods, which are almost universally prepared with omega-6-rich vegetable oils, adding sunflower oil at home pushes that ratio even further out of balance. And yet, none of this means one oil is a miracle and the other is poison. What the research suggests is that the type of oil matters, the way it is used matters, and the overall dietary context matters enormously. Context is everything in nutrition, and anyone who tells you otherwise is oversimplifying a deeply complex system. Now, let us talk about something that rarely comes up in conversations about cooking oil: the economics behind these two products and what the global market actually looks like. Olive oil is one of the most traded agricultural commodities in the world. Leading producers are concentrated in the Mediterranean basin. Spain consistently ranks as the largest producer, globally, followed by Italy and Greece. The production is deeply labor-intensive. Olives must be harvested and pressed quickly to preserve quality, and the growing conditions cannot easily be replicated outside the Mediterranean climate zone. In recent years, droughts linked to changing climate patterns have significantly reduced olive harvests, pushing global olive oil prices to record highs in several consecutive years. In the United States of America, consumers have seen the price of extra virgin olive oil rise sharply, some retail prices doubling compared to just a few years prior. Sunflower oil tells a very different economic story. Ukraine and Russia have historically been the world's two largest producers, together accounting for a substantial majority of global exports. This concentration of supply became a serious issue in 2022, when the conflict between those two countries disrupted production and export routes, causing a global shortage and a dramatic price spike. Countries that had relied on sunflower oil as an affordable staple suddenly found themselves looking for alternatives. The episode illustrated something important: that price, availability, and geopolitical events are inseparable from the choices that appear on a grocery store shelf. For the everyday consumer in the United States of America, Extra virgin olive oil commands a premium that reflects its production costs and quality characteristics. Refined sunflower oil is typically one of the most affordable options available. However, because olive oil has a more distinctive flavor and is more stable at moderate heat, many people find they use less of it to achieve the same result. When the cost is calculated per use rather than per bottle, the gap between the two narrows considerably. And for those willing to invest in high-quality, single-origin olive oils, products increasingly marketed with the same provenance and traceability as fine wine, the argument is not just nutritional, it is experiential. That depth of flavor is simply not replicable by any refined vegetable oil at any price. 2 bottles. Thousands of years of history on one side, a century of industrial agriculture on the other. Neither is a villain, neither is a cure, but they are not the same, and now you know exactly why. The next time you stand in that grocery store aisle and reach for a bottle of cooking oil, you will not be making a random choice. You will be making an informed one, and that, ultimately, is what this channel is built for. To give you the information that lets you decide for yourself, based on evidence, not marketing. The conversation about what we eat and why is one of the most important conversations we can have. And it does not end here. Every week, we take 2 foods that millions of people consume without a second thought, and we look at what the research is actually telling us. Not what the packaging says, not what the trend of the moment claims, but what the data shows when you sit down and read it carefully, because the truth about food is almost always more complicated than the headline, and almost always more interesting. If today's breakdown gave you something to think about, consider sharing it with someone who deserves to know. And if you want to be here when we compare the next 2, because the next one is going to raise some serious questions about something most people eat every single morning, then hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We do not do hype here. We do not do miracle claims. We just do the research, lay it out clearly, and let you make up your own mind. That is the deal. We will see you in the next one.